An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643, the most influential work on the science of Hadith in existence. Category 26. On the manner of relating Hadith and the stipulations regarding the conveyance of them, and related matters. Many of the matters relevant to this topic have already been discussed in the previous two categories. Some people are excessively strict in relating hadith and others are excessively lax. One example of strictness is the doctrine of those who say a hadith may not be cited as a proof unless the transmitter relates from his memory and recollection. This is related from Malik and Abu Hanifa, God be pleased with them. Abu Bakr al-Saydalani al-Marwazi was a Shafi'i who subscribed to this view. Another excessively strict doctrine is that of those who permit a scholar to rely on his book when transmitting, but would not view that relation from it as valid, as if he had lent it out or let it out of his possession on account of its absence from him. We have already related the views of those who tolerate laxity and the refutation of them in the course of the preceding explication of the means of receiving and taking up hadith. One group of lax transmitters are those who hear certain compositions and are remiss to the extent that when they grow old and come to be needed, ignorance and greed lead them to relate the texts from purchased or borrowed copies which are unsound and have not been collated. The expert Abu Abdullah al-Hakim included those people in the ranks of discredited transmitters. He said, "They mistakenly believe that they are truthful in their relation. This happens often among people. Certain leading scholars and people known for their piety practice it." Abu Abdullah Lahi'a al-Misri was a lax transmitter. Despite his augustness, citing his relations as proofs was rejected on account of his laxity. It was said that Yahya bin Hasan saw a group of people who had a personal collection of hadith, juz, which they heard from Ibn Lahi'a. He examined the text and not a single hadith in it belonged to Ibn Lahi'a. He went to Ibn Lahi'a and told him that. He said, "What can I do? They bring a book and say, 'This contains your hadith,' so I transmit it to them." Similar accounts occur among teachers of our days. A student brings a personal collection of a book to a teacher and says, "This is your relation." When the teacher lets him recite it to him, trusting him blindly, without undertaking any investigation to ascertain the truth of the ascription. The correct view is the one the majority adhere to, and it is the middle path between excessive strictness and excessive negligence. When a transmitter meets the stipulations which were explicated above for receiving and taking up hadith, and he collates his book and fixes his audition in the fashion described above, it is permissible for him to transmit it from them. This holds even if he had lent his book to someone and it was out of his possession, when it was probable that the book is free from alteration and changes. In particular, this is true when the transmitter is one of those who for the most part would recognize whether the text had been altered or changed. That is because in the field of the relation of hadith we depend on likelihood. When this is obtained, it is enough, and nothing more than this is stipulated. God knows best. Some subsidiary issues. 1. When the transmitter is blind and did not memorize his hadith from the mouth of the teacher who transmitted to him, but instead sought the aid of some trustworthy person to make precise his audition and commit the book to memory, and in transmitting the text asked for their help in the recitation of the book to him, his relation is sound when he takes care in that regard to the best of his ability, so that the likelihood is that there is no alteration. However, he is more liable to be challenged or forbidden when something like this than a person who can see. However, the expert al-Khatib said, "Audition from a sighted, illiterate person who did not memorize from the transmitter the audition he heard from him, rather it was written down for him, is the same as audition from a blind person who did not memorize his hadith from the transmitter. Some scholars have forbidden it, and some have permitted it. God knows best." 2. When a student hears a book and then wants to relate it from a copy of the text which does not contain a record of his audition and was not collated with the copy he heard, although his teacher gave audition from his copy to others, it is not licit for him to relate from that copy. The authority and jurist Abu Nasr ibn Sabbagh stated this unequivocally in something of his we read. In the same way, if the copy contained the record of his teacher's audition or a reliable person related it from the teacher, it would still not be permissible for the student to relate from it, relying merely on that, since he would not be certain that it did not contain additions not present in the copy which he heard. I found that al-Khatib had related corroboration of this form from most of the scholars of hadith. He stated that when the student finds the text of the transmitter and the student's audition is not recorded in it, he finds a copy written from his teacher, the authenticity of which he has no qualms about. The generality of the scholars of Hadith forbid him to transmit it. On the other hand, it is said that Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani and Muhammad bin Bakr Bursani allowed it. That holds true unless the student has a global license, or something similar from his teacher for the material he relates. In this case, it is permissible for him to relate from that copy, since it is nothing more than the relation of those additions, which may be found in the copy of the text the student wants to use, under the term, he informed us, or he transmitted to me, by virtue of the license without an explanation that the additions are transmitted by license. That is a minor matter, the like of which may be tolerated. Indeed, we related above that the licensing is necessary for every audition, so that the words and passages which were omitted due to inattention, or for some other reason, may be transmitted by virtue of the license, even if they were not actually spoken. If the copy of the text which the student wants to use instead contains the record of the audition of the teacher's teacher, or it was heard from the teacher or his teacher, or related from the teacher of his teacher, in that case, to relate from it, the student should have a comprehensive license, ijaza shamila, from his teacher, and his teacher should have a comprehensive license from his teacher. So, in that case, to relate from it, the student should have a comprehensive license from his teacher, and his teacher should have a comprehensive license from his teacher. This is a good facilitation which God, and praise belongs to God, led us to, and the need for it is very pressing in our time, and God knows best. Stay tuned.